MacVoices is supported by Eero, the wireless mesh network solution that you need. Visit Eero.com to get yours and use the code MacVoices to receive free overnight shipping to the US and Canada. And by you, our viewers and listeners, through our new Patreon campaign. If you get value from MacVoices, please consider helping support the show by visiting patreon.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, we have a bit of a holiday miracle going on for this show. Most likely, this is the last show before the holidays, before the new year, that we'll get to talk to Mr. Joe Kissell. So first of all, welcome, Joe. It's always great to see you. Thanks for being here.
It's always a pleasure. I wore a green shirt for the occasion, and my face is red, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was going to point out that you're not the typical looking holiday elf that we think of.
I like to think of myself as a right jolly old elf, but no, I'm probably not.
Okay.
I don't think I actually own a Santa hat. I have a tinfoil hat, but not a Santa hat. So I'd probably obtain one.
That may be appropriate for a geek. Maybe just stick a little cotton ball on top and you got it.
Yeah, I'll do that.
So the Christmas miracle I'm referring to, or the holiday miracle, I should say, because we don't leave anybody out, is right. Joe is here to talk about updates to some Take Control books. Not one, not two, not three, 4 Take Control book updates, 4 all at once, right here.
That's right.
That is impressive, Joe. That really is. I mean, you're going out 2017 with a bang.
Yes, I am. What can I say? I've been pulling out all the stops because it had to happen.
Okay, so the books, and I'm going to read it because I will leave one out.
It's fine.
The books are Take Control of Troubleshooting Your Mac, Take Control of Speeding Up Your Mac, Take Control of Maintaining Your Mac, Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac.
Those are them.
Now, some people may recall that there have been a little bit of an evolution with these titles. So I'll let you talk about that evolution and give us the history before we dig into a little bit of the content.
Yeah. When I was working on these updates to these books just recently, I was like, man, I got to explain this whole history in the the what's new section. And I was afraid that the history lesson was going to take me like 3 pages and people would just die of boredom before they ever got to the actual book content. And somehow I managed to squeeze it down to about, a paragraph or 2 per book. But the condensed version is this. There were these 4 books, and all 4 of the books were really, really popular Take Control books. And each of them had a number of updates in the Take Control world. Some of them went through 2 editions. Some of them went through many different. Okay, so in the case of the Backups book, that book, which of course we've talked about endlessly, went through 4 or 5 title changes, and it split and it merged and went through many new editions. Cause just like the world of backups evolved over time, and when it was new, we felt like we needed to put the word Mac OS 10 in the title, otherwise people might think it was for older Macs too. And when Time Machine came out, we felt like we needed to spin off another title that was about sort of an easier way of doing backups. And anyway, so over time, the Backups book or books just went through a lot of changes. But when we got to around 2015, there were these 4 books, and all of them had sold really well, were very popular Take Control books. But Adam and Tanya got to the point where they felt like they couldn't keep updating them and retain their sanity, I guess, because it is a lot of work to update the new titles, to keep people informed in the new titles. And every new book they worked on, takes up a lot of space to do the production and the web page and the PR and send out email and all these kinds of things. And they felt like continuing to update these books would push other new titles that they really wanted to do aside. And So with a great amount of regret, they said, Joe, I think we just got to drop these 4 books from our catalog. And I was like, no, don't do that. I love these books. And more importantly, these are really, books that a lot of people really need. And so I offered to just adopt them And so I hired my own editor, my own tech reviewer, my own artist to do the cover art, and I republished the books with different names, and totally updated them just on my own. And these were called Joe on Tech Guide. So instead of Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac, it was Backing Up Your Mac, a Joe on Tech Guide. And so I sold these myself on my own website, but also Take Control resold them for me, so you could still buy those books from Take Control. And that way, sort of everybody wins. That Take Control gets to keep the books in their catalog. The customers get to have the updated information. I get to still make money off of the books, and the instructions don't disappear, and they stay up to date. So that was a fine solution. But now that I've bought Take Control, I kind of don't feel like running two publishers. Makes
sense.
All these books really, really, really needed updates. I've been wanting and meaning to update them for the last, 4 months or so. But I feel like, updating them in the Joe on Tech world and then also running Take Control just adds too many complications for me. So I thought it'd be simpler, just kind of less of a hassle for everybody to reintegrate them. So what I've done is I've moved them back into the Take Control world. They now have Take Control titles and Take Control covers, and they basically got their old names back, but with the edition number incremented. And then in addition to doing that, I updated them thoroughly. And so now they're back in the Take Control world, and I'm really happy that they are there. I'm really happy that they're up to date. And as we'll talk about later, I'm doing everything I can to make them really attractive purchases. but anyway, so they are new versions of these books that have gone on this kind of long journey, and I like to just think of them as being back home. And so they're all back, and I expect they will stay there for quite some time.
I'm delighted to see them back because first of all, that's quite a range of topics, but they're pretty mainstream topics. These are things that everybody, there's no one that's listening to this that wouldn't benefit from giving a quick scan through these books. You're going to learn things, especially if you've moved over to High Sierra, but even if you haven't. So I love the fact that, it's not like you picked up 2 or 3 titles that were marginal or that were very specialized. These are just about as mainstream as Take Control gets.
I really think of these as 4 of our absolute core titles. I've referred to them in my little Joe on Tech world as the Mac Fitness Bundle or the Mac Fitness Collection, because these are 4 aspects of keeping your Mac healthy. And to be fair, there is a certain amount of overlap. There are little sections that appear in 2 or more of the books. There are certain sets of instructions that appear in 2 or more that, everybody needs to know how to do a safe boot. And a safe boot is going to come up in the context of maintaining your Mac. It's going to come up in the context of troubleshooting your Mac. It's going to come up in the context of maintaining your Mac, of speeding up your Mac. And so there are some things like that there are chunks of text or very similar text anyway that appear in more than one of the books. But apart from that, each one of the books has really unique content that the others don't have, and they sort of take things in different directions. And I feel that it's really important that everybody gets the whole story. I mean, I have to assume that not everybody is going to buy all the books. So when I'm talking about, like maintaining your Mac, and I say, well, one of the first things you need to do if you're going to maintain your Mac is have good backups, and so I give like a really short and simplified version of the story and backups, because just on the off chance you don't have that other book, you still need to know what to do. It's really, really important. But each book goes into quite a bit more depth about its particular area of focus. Like I talk about, I spend, 2-3 pages in the troubleshooting book about like, oh, what if you have a slow Mac? Well, try these little things. But then the speeding up your Mac book is over 200 pages long. It expands that little topic into, a much bigger thing. So, but you're right. These are these are four absolutely core topics that every Mac user should know about, should have as reference guides, and should keep up with, because the facts do change, sometimes significantly, as time goes on.
So my understanding is that some of these books had, I don't want to say marginal because that's not fair, but they had some had more updates, and there was a lot more meat to change than some of the others. Which is which? I mean, where should people maybe focus their primary attention?
Without a doubt, Take Control of Backing Up Your Mac had the most changes by far. It was a very, very significant update. The list of what's new is quite extensive, and we'll talk about that. Anyway, the most extensive changes by far are in that one. Next most is maintaining. Not a huge number of changes, but some fairly substantial stuff. The other two, Speeding Up and Troubleshooting, had the least number of changes. All four of the books share two things in common. They were all updated for High Sierra, and they were all updated to reflect the latest state of Mac hardware. So a year ago, I guess I don't. The last, let's say when some of these books were last updated, at the time some of the books were last updated, you couldn't even buy a Mac with a Thunderbolt 3 port. That didn't exist. So now you have Macs with only Thunderbolt 3 ports, and then there's this endless confusion between, well, is it USB-C or is it USB 3.1? Is that generation 1 or is it generation 2 or is it Thunderbolt 3, or like how do all those things mix together? And the story about not just like ports on your Mac, but which Macs have upgradable RAM, and which use an SSD or don't, or can be upgraded or not, and there are like all these different stories about that apply to new Mac hardware that we've seen in the last 1 to 2 years that was not the case before. And so I talk about the iMac Pro, even though mine that I ordered last week hasn't shown up yet, but I talk about it in the book, and in most or all of the books, because I want these books to be absolutely up to date. So they all have stuff like that, and they all, as I check for things like software and hardware that I mentioned that is no longer available, or new products that I should also mention or recommend, or some utility, I say, oh, download this and try this. And then I realize, oh, that actually doesn't work under High Sierra. Let's use something else, stuff like that. So basically, I've gone through all the books and made sure that they all work, that everything there, whether it's part of High Sierra specifically, or whether it's something out in the larger world that affects the book, that it's all current as of today. Tomorrow, who knows? But today, they work.
One thing I've always appreciated about you, Joe, is your subtlety. That you don't indicate that there are anything active going on in your life, like ordering a new Mac Pro or anything, iMac Pro. No. So, I'm always fascinated by the extent of our discussions for backups. Any of the backup books, any of the versions of the backup books, it just seems like that world changes so much. And you don't expect it to. I mean, it almost feels like if there's one part of the Mac world that shouldn't change, it shouldn't be the backups. It should be pretty simple. I hit a button, all my data gets copied over here, and that's it. Or it gets sent to the cloud, and that's it. And boy, if you aren't paying attention to this, you are living on borrowed time.
Every time I update this book, and this is now the 115th time I've done it, I'm like, okay, this time we're good. This version of the book is going to surely last for 3 or 4 years, because what else could change? And as usual, I have my list of things that I think I'm going to edit in the book. And as I'm going through the book, I'm like, oh, that's wrong too. Oh, boy, I forgot about this. And like, I'll just give you an example. Like, it's one thing to say, okay, High Sierra is out. And so, some things have different names, or they're in different places. There are different software compatibility issues. But one of the things that happens in High Sierra is APFS. Now, we've talked about that before in other contexts, but it turns out that this new file format, which is mandatory if your Mac has an SSD, and forbidden if it doesn't so far, has really significant implications when it comes to backups. Some things you might have to do differently, some things that you can't do at all, some things that you can do that you couldn't do before. And so it's not just talking about what's new in High Sierra, it's like adding that layer of complexity into it. What if you're using APFS? Like, should you format your Time Machine drive to use APFS? No, you definitely should not do this. Time Machine is not compatible with it. I mean, you can use Time Machine to back up an APFS drive, but you can't use it as the destination. You can't have your external drive use APFS, at least not yet. Not even if that drive is an SSD. So there are a whole bunch of things like that that I had to talk about in the book. Another big thing that happened in the backups world seems like, I don't know, we might have talked about it for an hour or so, is Crash Plan for Home going away? And don't want to really belabor that, but for years, that was my number one recommendation in the book, not just for cloud backups, but also for local version backups that you just store on a hard drive, because Crash Plan could do that too. And it can be do peer-to-peer backups and backups to other computers on your network and stuff. So that's gone now. And so I had to really rework a lot of the book to accommodate Crash Plan for Home not being a thing. I decided it was kind of time to retire most of the coverage of FireWire because, FireWire, I mean, if you have an older Mac with FireWire, great. But for any Macs within the last several years, that's just not a thing anymore. And that's just the beginning. Like right now, I'm looking at my list of what's changed. That's the first 3 items in there: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 more. So a lot has changed in the backups world. Same thing, new hardware, new software, new cloud services, prices changing, features changing, all kinds of stuff.
MacVoices is sponsored by Eero, the wireless mesh networking system you really need. What do you want out of your wireless network? First, and most obviously, it's wireless. But wireless doesn't do you much good if it's only in one room, so you want great wireless coverage throughout your home or small business. Second, you want it to be fast, to match your hardwired connection. Third, you want it simple to set up, because who wants to spend an afternoon or evening digging through a router control panel trying to figure out what all those settings mean? Fourth, unfortunately, in today's world, you need to keep your router updated and secure more than ever. That one gets overlooked too often because, again, who wants to spend more time managing your router than using it? Eero's wireless mesh networks checks off all these boxes. Because it's mesh, your space is blanketed in strong, fast, secure Wi-Fi, so that connecting in the den is the same as connecting in the basement, and in the attic, even in the garage and the yard. Now, with the addition of a third 5 GHz radio, the second generation Eero is tri-band, and twice as fast as before. And a new thread radio makes it easy to connect your low-power devices, such as locks, doorbells, and other Internet of Things devices. Eero's setup is about as simple as it gets. If you can use an iPhone app, you can configure your Eero. Easy-to-understand screens will have you up and running in no time. And maybe best of all, Eero pushes the updates you need to your device, so there's no need for you to spend time managing your network. Unless you want to, of course. But who wants to? This is enterprise-grade Wi-Fi for your home without the hassles. I know. I'm running an Eero system in my home, and it's the best wireless experience I've ever had. I'd like you to have that experience as well, and you can. Visit Eero.com right now and use the code MacVoices at checkout to get free overnight shipping on your new Eero system to the US and Canada. Because again, who wants to wait? That's Eero.com, EERO.com, and the promo code MacVoices at checkout to get free overnight shipping to the US and Canada. It's just that easy. Thanks to Eero for their support of MacVoices. You've got ahead of me. I was going to ask you about APFS and how it affected all of the books. because I would
Yeah.
think that it had to affect troubleshooting. It had to affect backups, obviously. Not sure about speeding up your Mac because that was sort of the objective of APFS. And let's see, what were the other troubleshooting? Maintaining.
Maintaining.
That.
So, of the 4 books, APFS is mostly relevant to backing up. The problem with talking about, I could probably have like a 50-page book just on troubleshooting APFS, but I didn't want to talk about that in the troubleshooting book because it's still in such a state of flux. One of the things I did mention in all of the books is that many of the the like disk utilities, the third-party disk repair things like Disk Warrior, have not yet been updated to work on APFS drives. SoftRaid does not yet work on APFS drives, and I forget. I don't have the entire list in my head, but like Drive Genius and TechTool Pro and stuff, they're all at various stages of beginning to figure out how to implement APFS support. And some of them do like read only or for some tasks, but not others. Or they're like, check back in a month or 2, or we're working on it, or we're waiting for Apple to release some API or whatever. So it's messy. And I'd like to just be able to say, hey, if you have an APFS drive and you're having a problem, run this utility. But I can't actually say that because the utilities don't exist yet. And on top of that, Apple has implied that at some point APFS will come to spinning hard drives, and it will come to Fusion drives, and it will support like there are issues with File Vault, and there are issues with Time Machine, and Apple has implied that these sorts of things will get worked out eventually, but they haven't been worked out yet. And so that's an area in which I felt a little bit squeamish, a little bit hesitant to give you instructions because I felt like they'd go out of date pretty quickly. I've also learned some things that I find kind of disturbing. For example, it turns out that in some situations, APFS can be much, much slower than HFS Plus. And there's almost nothing you can do about it. I mean, you can, but it's the sort of thing where unless you are really a glutton for punishment, you're going to kind of take what you get, and you're going to take APFS on your SSD, and you're not going to do these magic tricks in terminal to disable it, and you're going to take HFS Plus on your hard drives, and you're not going to try to switch that. But for certain activities in certain contexts, APFS, for all its benefits, which are many, can actually be slower. And the more I learn about this stuff, like I read blog posts by, like Dave Nanian of Super Duper, or Mike Bombich of Carbon Copy Cloner, or Tim Standing of SoftRaid. And these guys are all incredibly smart and really have detailed low-level knowledge of disk stuff. And the stuff I read about APFS from these guys makes me really shudder, because it makes me feel like Apple kind of jumped the gun. And even to the extent that the technology is okay, they have really not released anywhere near enough developer documentation or developer access to the hooks, the APIs that let them do cool stuff with APFS. So that's all of that just gives me kind of a yucky feeling, and it makes me say less about that kind of stuff than I otherwise would. And all I can really say is it's going to settle down. In the meantime, if you happen to encounter an APFS specific problem, you're probably going to want to consult the web. And at the risk of sounding like I'm shilling for one of the books, this is why it's more critical than ever to have at least one good backup. Oh, for sure.
You
For
know,
sure.
I'm going to do my little speech, Joe. So forgive me. So you can take a drink. But
Awesome.
the data is important, folks. The data is really important. But most of your data, if you put enough effort into it, can be recreated. It may take a lot of time. One of the most important things for me is my production environment. Finding my applications, re-downloading them, re-entering serial numbers if I didn't get them from the Mac App Store, all of that, setting things up, setting preferences. I mean, you're talking a good 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks to get it back to where it is right now. Because right now, when you sit down in front of your Mac, you know where everything is, and you know what all the preferences are. Even if you aren't aware that you've set them, at some point you made a decision or you learned what those were. So that to me is just like, that's worth almost more than the data, is to be able to plug in another drive, restore, and keep on working in my environment.
That is such an excellent point. And I just got a new Mac, so I bought 2 Macs. I mean, Santa Claus dropped 2 Macs carefully down my chimney.
Subtle again, Joe.
Yeah. So the iMac Pro is not here yet. The MacBook Pro is, and I got the MacBook Pro, and I realized. So what my plan was, of course, as I always do, I'll just take a clone from my old MacBook Pro, plug in that hard drive to the new one, and recopy it, and then off I go. And then I realized, actually, I do not own any hard drive with a USB-C connector. I cannot physically attach any of my old hard drives to the new Mac. So it's just been sitting here on the desk waiting for that adapter to arrive. It arrived today. So I get to do that today. But I had this period of time where I was thinking, well, maybe I won't do that. Maybe I'll just, reinstall all of my apps. I'll just re-download everything, and I'll copy my data from a backup, but I'll reinstall all of my apps, and then I'll go through and set all the preferences and enter all the license codes, and then like somehow like, that was stupid. I had a moment of, that's insane. You shouldn't do that. Life is too short. If you have a way of avoiding that endless amount of work, and you get to some app, it's like, oh well, I entered the license code, but it was registered on the other machine, and now it's saying I can't use the license on 2 machines, and so I have to go unregister on the first, like whatever, like all these hassles. Like honestly, life is too short. And this is one of the reasons you have backups, and this is also one of the reasons, like people frequently say to me, well, because this comes up like in the context of maintaining your Mac, because I talk about getting rid of clutter. And they're like, you know what? I don't want to follow all your steps to find stuff that I don't need anymore and delete it. I want to just nuke and pave. I'm going to erase the whole thing and start over from scratch. I'm like, if you have nothing but time and that's fun for you, then be my guest. But I don't think you realize how much effort and pain and agony it's going to cause you. Most people, anyway. Well, probably, maybe not for some people, but I think for most people, it's just so much of a hassle that why would you do that to yourself? So,
yeah. I just feel so strongly about that. And for less than $100, you can go on Amazon right now and buy a perfectly good USB 2 or USB 3 hard drive that is more than sufficient. And not advertising anybody's product here, but Super Duper includes an option to clone your drive free. Now, the incremental backups and all, yeah, you have to pay for it. So by Christmas Eve, you can easily have a backup that of both your production environment and the data on your Mac. There's no problem with it, and it's not hard. And for heaven's sake, just set it to run and go to sleep overnight, and let it do the work then. It's not something that's going to take you out of production or off your Mac, because you have to sleep sometime. Most of us do. So
I'm totally going to sleep. You call it, right?
Yes, sleep.
I am definitely going to try that.
Give it a shot. Give it a shot.
And to your point, I have to say, I have seen like Black Friday sales on hard drives. I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it was like a 5 terabyte portable bus-powered USB 3 hard drive for like $120, $130. And if, they're like, I mean, they might be a little more expensive than that, not on sale, but you can often find deals that are around that price. And, gone are the days when it was such a huge investment in an external hard drive to back up your data. It's like, like you say, it's like $100 should be able to comfortably store the data on almost any Mac. And it's just so worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Joe, on the maintaining book, I wanted to at least touch on that for a second, because we're talking a lot about backups with either High Sierra and APFS drives, or just in general. Anything really new in the world of maintaining your Mac that we should be paying attention to on a daily, weekly, monthly basis?
I'm looking over my list now. So one of the things I realized in the maintaining book was that I really needed to say a lot more about the optimized storage options in Sierra and later. And, these things have been around for more than a year. Not a whole lot changed with High Sierra specifically. But even though not a whole lot changed, I realized that I just didn't say enough about how optimized storage affects maintenance and backups, and it could even have sort of an effect on speeding up, to the extent that this is a mechanism whereby you can free up space on your disk. One of the things that I specifically hadn't talked about before that I realized, oh, I didn't say anything about that. That's awful. I really need to do that. Is when you do like a get info on your disk, it's going to say, and so like if you let's back up. You like look at the bottom of a Finder window. You select your. I'm just going to do this now. You select your hard drive, and it says, oh, you have 1.08 terabytes available. Great. So you do a get info on that window, and you look down where it says available. Oh, it says 1.0 terabytes available, and then in parentheses, 333.98 gigabytes purgeable. And you're like, purgeable? What does that mean? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? And does that mean that data that's purgeable is on top of the amount that is available, or that's part of the amount that's available? And this is important because when I say you really should make sure that you leave a certain amount of space free on your hard drive or SSD. Actually, don't use the word free anymore because it's now ambiguous. It's not really free. Is it available or is it purgeable? So it turns out that if it says you have 500 gigabytes available and 200 gigabytes purgeable, what that really means is that you have 300 gigabytes that are empty. That's actually free. The other two, that's purgeable, means that if macOS starts running out of space, then those are files that it knows it can delete at any moment to make space for new things. This could be part of your iCloud photo library. This could be if you sync your desktop or documents folder through iCloud or just other stuff in iCloud Drive. There are various different categories, but these are basically things that are marked as I already have a copy in the cloud. iCloud has a copy in the cloud. So if I had to delete your local copy to make space for other stuff, it wouldn't be a big deal and I wouldn't alert you. I'd just do it and it would be fine. So there are implications to that for how you back up and maintain your hard drive and how you do troubleshooting and so forth. So I had to talk about that. So that was kind of a new thing. There were need to say some slightly different things about dealing with your laptop's battery and monitoring utilities you might use to check on disk space and RAM and this, that, and the other thing, and some crash plan also actually comes up in the context of maintaining your Mac too, but a lot of it is just like it used to be that you could delete some files and empty the trash and you see that number go up. Oh, I had this much space. Now I have this much space. That's great. It worked. I have more. And now you do that, and that it might not go up, or it might not go up as much as you thought it did, or you might think, wow, where did all this space go? And do I care? So those are some of the sorts of things that I talk about there. One other thing that I do in maintaining is I modify some old advice. I used to say, all right, you can turn on all these, like software updates are generally a good thing, and you can turn on all these different categories of software updates in the App Store preference pane. But you might want to just not have Apple install things automatically. You might want to just like have it tell you that there's a new update, but then wait for a few days to install it. But I've actually revised that advice for the security updates, because in recent days, we've seen some like really heavy duty security problems. Like, the root password thing is one of the things I'm particularly thinking of, where anybody can just, anybody with access to your Mac can just type in root and log in with no password. That's like a really, really, really serious problem. Well, Apple fixed it in about a day, but you have to let Apple install security updates. And so because there have been too many of these things recently, I've said, no, actually don't wait on those things. For security updates, yeah, you want to go ahead and install those right away.
Okay. So we could go on for hours, because there's a lot here. I mean, 4 books, obviously there's a lot here, but you've got two new Macs to set up. And I've got to start my Christmas shopping, because why would you why would you start early? So with that, is there, before we get to pricing and all, is there anything else in particular that we want to make sure we highlight to folks for any of the 4 books or all of the 4 books?
Looking over my list, troubleshooting, a lot of the stuff we have talked about. There are some. I talk a little bit. I talk a little bit about troubleshooting Apple Mail, and we're going to talk again, I don't know, in maybe a month about a new version of my Apple Mail book, which was supposed to come out before now, but I've been really struggling with Apple Mail, honestly. I used to have nothing but good things to say about it, and now not so much. And I think the new version of the Apple Mail book is like, I'm probably going to have a chapter that's just like, here are things that are wrong, and don't even bother asking me about them, because they're wrong for me too. You didn't make a mistake. You didn't miss something. No, it's just Apple Mail does not do the right thing. And it's not you, but also there's no solution. Sorry. It's like the I feel your pain chapter, but can't solve this problem. So there's just been kind of a lot of that stuff with Apple Mail. A lot of things that are going wrong that I feel really bad that I can't offer any useful advice about. But nevertheless, there were some changes with how Apple named and placed and arranged certain things that a lot of my instructions had to be revised in troubleshooting Apple Mail. Looking over the speeding up list here. Okay. Here's an interesting little thing. So my ISP, my broadband provider, increased my maximum speed. That's great. And so I had to get a new cable modem. No problem. And of course, the cable modem has a gigabit Ethernet connection that goes to a gigabit Ethernet hub. It goes to my Wi-Fi router. Everything is gigabit Ethernet. And of course, one of those gigabit Ethernet cables goes from there down to my Mac, which has a gigabit Ethernet port. So get the faster service. That's great. Go on to my MacBook Pro, which of course is connecting by Wi-Fi. Super fast. Great. iPhone, super fast. Great. I go to my iMac, which is connected with an Ethernet cable to a gigabit Ethernet hub, and it's the slowest Mac in the house. My internet access, it like would never go above 100 megabits per second. And I'm puzzling over this like forever. And is there something wrong with my settings? Is there something wrong with my switch? Is there something like where? And it took me an unreasonable amount of time and a lot of head scratching to realize the problem was the cable. That particular connection was using an old Cat5 cable, and Cat5 cables can't transmit at anywhere close to gigabit Ethernet speeds. I replaced that cable with a Cat6 cable, and that was it. The speed magically got faster, and it was just something that it never even occurred to me. Like, I've just got a drawer full of Ethernet cables, and I don't like look at the fine print on them to figure. I just figured they were probably just all fine, but as it turns out, somehow I had one that was a Cat5 cable, and it wouldn't give me the fastest speed. So there are little details like that of things that I didn't write about before because they just never occurred to me before. But now that I've had these experiences, it's like, yeah, you want to check that too. And some more things about Wi-Fi too. Like in my house, I went through all these different Wi-Fi routers and trying to get good signals everywhere and trying to get better throughput. And I was just having so much pain and frustration with Wi-Fi. And I finally switched to Orbeez. It's sort of like mesh networking, not exactly, but there are a bunch like that. Google has them, and there's Eero and there's Orbi and so forth. But these you get multiple units of this. One goes into your Ethernet connection, and then you put one or more other units around your house, and they just talk to each other and they figure it all out. And you don't have to do anything else. You just plug them in and turn them on, basically. That has made my Wi-Fi life so much better and so much faster. So I talk about stuff like that too. So there's a whole lot of stuff. I had this really long section at the end of the book where I was talking about there's different kinds of USB, there's different kinds of Thunderbolt, there's different kinds of FireWire, and what happens if you have an older USB device hooked up to a newer hub, hooked up like all the different combinations of stuff. And that chapter just had to be totally rewritten now that we have USB-C and Thunderbolt 3, and there are all these issues with there are 4 different kinds of USB-C cables, and they're not all interoperable, and it's just such a hassle. So that's all spelled out now for you.
So lots more reasons to go and pick up all these books and spend a little bit of the holiday time reviewing them, if not for fun, just for your own education. But for those of us who live and breathe this stuff, it's fun, I think.
Well, let's say learning is fun.
Yes, learning is fun. There you go.
I had to learn a lot of things for these updates that I was not aware of. I didn't even know that I didn't know these things, and I had to find out how much I didn't know, and then find out what I didn't know. And I can't say it all makes perfect sense, but at least I can clearly delineate I can tell you what the facts are. Okay, I can't tell you why the facts are the way they are, but I can tell you what the facts are, and I can say, if you need to do this, then you need to get this kind of a thing and this kind of a cable, and here's the process. So at least there's that. But now I'm like, I got this new MacBook Pro, and comes with a USB-C charger, USB-C cable. Great. Plug in the cable, both ends. Great. It transmits electricity, so that's fine. But I would not want to plug that cable into a hard drive that had a USB connection, because that would go at USB 2.0 speeds, just painfully slow, because that's not the right, even though the connectors are okay, and even though it would work, it wouldn't work right. That's not the right kind of cable for that job. So I have to choose one of the other 3 varieties of USB-C cables, but not an active Thunderbolt 3 cable, because that would have its own set of problems. And it's just, let me just say, you don't want to have to figure this stuff out from scratch. It's let me do that painful research for you. I've done the painful research. I've done it. I've figured out all that stupid crap. So you just read what I wrote, and you will have far more hair left at the end of that process than you otherwise would.
It does seem like the more they try to simplify things, well, there is no way to simplify it because even the simplification introduces its own complexity. Because if we have the same connectors, that's great, but now they don't support all the protocols, and yeah, it becomes a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the books and what's covered in them, but let's talk a little bit about how you go about getting these. Now, obviously, you go to takecontrolbooks.com, and they're all sitting there waiting for you.
Yes, that is true.
But how they go about paying for these books, Joe?
All right. So there's a little bit of a story there. And let me first say what you said is true. You go to takecontrolbooks.com. That'll be standing right there in the top of the page, waiting for you to click the buy button. Now, if you happened to have had one of the Joe on Tech versions of these books, I'm sure that by the time this airs, I will have put in some redirects or some links or something on those pages to tell you, go over here to buy it. But a few things are going to happen. The first thing that's going to happen is that if you bought one of these books recently, either from Take Control or from Joe on Tech, you will have received an email from me saying, because you bought this book recently, here's a free update. And pretty much, if you didn't get the email, you don't qualify for a free update. I'm trying to be as generous as I reasonably can, but it's a little bit complicated with those. Item 2, if you ever bought any version of any of these books from anyone before, even if you bought the very first version of Take Control of Mac OS X backups in 2004 or whatever it was, and you never bought any others of these books since, or if you bought one of my Joe on Tech books, or if you bought any previous version of any of these books, you can update any of those 4 books for $5. So these books have a $14.99 cover price, but you can have any or all of them for $5 each, as long as you at some point owned at least one of them. If you never owned any version of any of these books, even for you, I have a special Christmas treat. You don't have to pay the $15 of the cover price unless you only want one of the books. If you want one of the books, you pay the $15. If you buy 2 of the books, you get the other 2 for free. So basically, we have a 4-book bundle, all 4 books, total cover price $60. We're selling them for $30. So if you want to think of it as buy 2, get 2 free, or if you want to think of it as a half off, special, whatever. But that's it. I really, these are such important topics that I think all Mac users need to know about, that I've been racking my brains trying to figure out how I can make it easier and more attractive for everybody to buy these books. So I think, half off for people who have never owned any of them, and 2/3 off for people who have ever owned any of them is, if I do say so myself, a pretty sweet deal.
So I want to throw in my 2 cents on this too.
Okay.
I don't know any Mac consultant, hardware, software, in any capacity that charges less than $90 an hour for their time. And usually it's, frankly, a whole lot more. Okay, so think about the hours that Joe has put in on all of this, teaching you all that stuff about cables and APFS and what works with what doesn't and what you should watch out for. And if you buy these retail, you still come out at less than what the cheapest Mac consultant that I know does. And he's giving you ways to pick them up a whole lot cheaper. So, yeah, I know it sounds like a commercial, folks, but I really mean it. Go and put these in your library, keep them somewhere safe, and I promise you they will benefit you. No question about it.
Thank you for that commercial. And I will just say this, too. If you're saying, well, Joe, that's very generous of you. I'm glad you're letting me pay less, but couldn't I give you a Christmas present and pay more? Then you are welcome to buy multiple copies of each one. Buy them for all of your friends and all of your family members. just like add, or increase that quantity. You are welcome to pay me as much money as you'd like for these books.
I've heard that you accept Bitcoins too. Is that?
That is the one thing I don't accept, and that could be another whole discussion. But sometimes people actually send me paper checks in the mail. I can work with that.
Wow.
I pay by PayPal. I can do that. Credit cards, no problem. Pretty much, if you have money that you want to get from you to me, we can find a way. I've got Apple Pay on my iPhone. You send me some money by Apple Pay.
There you go.
We'll work it out.
Yeah. This is the kind of can-do person that Joe Kissell is.
That's right.
I love it. Okay, so let's do it again one more time. This is take control of troubleshooting your Mac, take control of speeding up your Mac, take control of maintaining your Mac, and the biggest one of all, take control of backing up your Mac. All from Take Control books, all from Joe Kissell, all at the end of 2017, which is a really impressive feat.
Yes, if I do say so myself. And so, now that I've got these out of the way, back to the paragraph factory to work on the next one, and then after that.
Yeah.
But I really felt that it was important to get these out as quickly as I possibly could. I'm sorry I didn't get them out even sooner, but I hope you enjoy them.
Well, Joe, I want to thank you for all these books. I also want to thank you for all the books you've written through 2017 and all the times you've come on MacVoices and shared your wisdom with all of us. I know that I've learned an awful lot. I know you've pulled my fat out of the fire more than one time through these books, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And we will do it again in 2018, which probably is not exactly what you want to hear because you'd like a little time off, but I'm looking forward yet to even the next one.
Great things are afoot. We will have many conversations next year.
That sounds good. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you too.
Oh, and yeah, there's something special happening. I wanted to make sure we said this. Something special happening on December 25th.
Yes. Well, some people say Happy Festivus. Some people say Happy Kwanzaa. In our household on December 25th, we say happy birthday because it's my wife Morgan's birthday. And she is always, she comes from a big family. So she has always kind of resented the fact that she had to share her birthday, not only with Jesus, but with all of her siblings for whom it's just Christmas. So it's happy birthday to Morgan on December 25th.
Good. We'll send our love and our happy birthday wishes as well, too.
I'll do that.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. I've said this before. Our holiday production schedule will get a little spotty because it's tough to get schedules together. Everybody's trying to take a little time off, including me. And then I'm getting ready to head for CES in Las Vegas. So you will see us. You just will see maybe a little bit different schedule than normal. But regardless, I hope you have a terrific holiday. Thanks for watching. We'll be back. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our MacVoices Facebook group and get more out of your Apple Tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices and join these folks who help keep MacVoices coming to you. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.